important skill of learning transfer, or what we call transfer, because what we want is students to be able to, what we want is students to be able to continuously learning transfer. What we want is students to be able to continuously experience transfer. Okay. All right, I think I'm good now. So what we want, what we want is students to be able to experience transfer on their own. So what school should really be about in instruction and teaching and learning should really be about is students learning. We should be helping students to learn on their own. All right. All right. So transfer is the product or the outcome of a student being able to learn on their own. So this is very good. This is very important when we talk about language acquisition. All right. Ultimately, we want the student to be able to pick up the language on their own. Okay. And it really depends on motivation, and we'll talk about motivation down the road. We'll break down the different types of motivation. But it's important that when we talk about teaching, that we look at teaching from the perspective of letting go. We want the student to be able to be what we call self-regulated. I'm sorry, I don't have my pen to write on the board. But we want our students to be self-regulated. Self-regulation. Okay. And self-regulation is the ability for someone to move on their own, to be self-motivated, to do things without the teacher asking them. This is what you want of your kids, right? Clean your room. I shouldn't have to ask you to clean your room. Right? I tell you every day to clean your room. Come on now. You see the sock on the floor, pick it up. Don't leave
every
the sock
day.
on the floor, right? So eventually, we do things enough. We try to help motivate our children. We try to help motivate our students to get them to the point where they pick the sock up without being asked. And that's what lifelong learning is about. Because what we know is when a person is self-regulated, they're more likely to be successful. Okay. And how will they gain that success? Through the sum of learning transfer. The ability to take all what they know to be able to solve current or future problems. So what they learned in the first grade, what their father taught them, watching their mother cook, remember when their uncle told them to show them how to do something. Remember when the teacher did that experiment. Remember when they fell down the steps. Remember when their friends showed them how to do this. Remember what they saw in the movie, what they learned in the movie, or when they read a book. Combining all of those inputs that Krashen will call comprehensible to solve a problem. And that's what we call transfer. So this is why it's important that schools do not compartmentalize teaching and learning with subjects. And that's what we normally do now, right? We go to the math class, and then we go to the English class, and then we go to the science class, and then we go to physical education, and then we go to social studies. It's very compartmentalized.
And this is education.
This is education.
Yes.
So what we want to do is we want to break ourselves from education. Because education, and the way we see it now, doesn't work for people. What works for people is learning.
Learning
Learning is different than education. Okay, learning education is a module of information that we want to give to students, and that module of information may be inert, and we talked about that in the last session. And we said that inert knowledge is knowledge that students cannot use to solve a current or future problem.
Yes, inner knowledge.
It's inert. And often what we learn in middle school, not elementary school, normally everything that we learn in elementary school we need normally, right? So kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, all that information is typically good information that we can use to solve current or future problems. However, the problem comes in middle school and high school, where the information starts to not really matter and then that's when what happens? That's when kids start acting up in school.
Oh.
Because the information is not and so there's a science to this. It's brain science. We have so when we gain information, okay, what we really want to do, or what the object is to get it in our frontal cortex right here. This is our frontal cortex. And this is the thinking part of the brain. However, information does not automatically go towards your frontal cortex. Doesn't. It would be great if it did, but it doesn't. There's a process. Okay. And then that process goes a little bit like this. And it's important that teachers know this. First part of information goes to what they call the RAS, the reticular activating system. The reticular activating system. And then the reticular activating system, it serves almost like your brain's security guard. Remember, the first and primary function of our brain is to do what? Keep us alive. Not to learn English, not to learn trigonometry, not to learn who Alexander the Great was, or what year the Eiffel Tower was built. Not that. Your brain's primary function is to keep you alive and well. So that is what it does first. So those inputs that we get, and everything that we get is inputs, right? Right? Our brain does the amazing job of determining what inputs are necessary and what inputs are not necessary. Because imagine if our brain was not able to do this, we would go crazy. We wouldn't be able to drive a car. We'd all be running around like, oh, what's going on, right? So our brain actually allows to focus on inputs that matter to us at that moment, at that time. So we're driving a car, we're looking straight ahead, we're looking at our peripheral, making sure that things around us, right, can get us to our destination, and that we can avoid those things and drive defensively and all that, speed up, slow down, right? That's the job of the reticular activating system. The reticular activating system's job is to make sure the information or the inputs, let's call it inputs, because we got to be very careful with this word information. All right. In fact, let's define that now. Information is inputs that we can use to solve a current or future problem. That's Dr. Ray's definition of information. Information is inputs that we can use to solve current or future problems. Okay, that's right. Information. Everything else is inputs or data.
Data.
Okay, so our brain, what the RAS does, is it allows us to determine what's data and what's information. You see, that's what our brain allows us to do. And it does a wonderful job of that. And that's one of the reasons we can surmise that there has to be a God. There has to be a powerful entity because he gave us this gift called a brain. All right. Now, so the RAS is the reticular activating system. That's like your security guard. All right. It protects you. It allows you to determine what information is safe and what information is unsafe. What information is unnecessary. All right. I can't do it right now, but I'll show you something that can prove this point. And there's a lot of research. You know, the classic research that they do is the clown walking in a midst of people, in a crowd of people, and somebody will walk up and say, "Did you see that clown?" And people don't even, "No, I didn't see the clown. There was a clown," right? Why didn't they see the clown, even though the clown has colorful colors on and a red nose and tall? Because that's just data. That's just inputs that didn't serve any purpose, right? It wasn't a threat, and it's not going to solve a current or future problem. So we call that data. We call it data because it actually existed, or input. It actually existed. So, you know, it's not false. The clown was actually there, but it's not really important to us. So we call that data. Okay. We can't use it to solve a current or future problem. Now, after the information, once the reticular activating system or the RAS determines that information is safe. All right, let's talk about what happens if the RAS determines the information is not safe. If the RAS determines that the information is not safe, it will send it to the non-thinking part of the brain. Okay, the non-thinking part of the brain. And then that part of the brain will determine whether you need to run, fight, or freeze. So we call it fight, flight, or freeze, the 3 Fs. So once the RAS determines that information is not safe or just data, then it gets sent to the non-thinking part of the brain. And then we decide whether we need to fight, run away, or ignore it or freeze, right? That's our instinct to handle information we deem as unsafe, right? If the information is deemed safe, or the input is deemed safe, we're going to consider it as information, still consider it, but at least it is safe. Then it goes to this part of the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala. Now, the amygdala is what I call the middle school student. I like to call the amygdala the middle school student. If you ever taught middle school is hard. Why? Why? Not because there's something wrong with middle schoolers. It's because middle schoolers start to realize that they're receiving education and not learning. Right? Because they start to ask the question, why do I need to learn this? I'm bored. Yes. I'm bored. What does this have to do with me? I don't want to learn English. I don't need to learn algebra. Why is this important? When students ask those questions, when middle schoolers ask those questions, or even high school students, that they are doing what their brain is telling them to do, what God has pre-wired in their brains to do. They're pre-wired. Just like Chomsky said they were pre-wired to receive language. Well, they're pre-wired to realize when they're being scammed. This is not important to me, right? And that's the amygdala doing that, right? So our job as educators is to set an environment where the learner understand and is aware that that information is important to them. So that's our job as educators, to say here's a bit of information, and here is why it is important to you, because you may need this bit of information to solve a current or future problem. Right? And so we give them the why. We give them the why. And the better we are at giving learners the why, the more effective that we are as educators or teachers. But more importantly, we're setting a student up to become a lifelong learner, to experience more opportunities of learning transfer. And that's the whole trick of teaching and learning. The whole trick of teaching and learning from an educator perspective is being able to explain the why students so they can understand that this is important, this is information, so they can experience as much learning transfer as possible so they can have a successful life. Right? But if we fail to give students the why and say, learn this algebra or learn this fact about history or learn this about social science. Well, what do I need to know this for? This is not going to help me play the video game. This is not putting money in my pocket right now. This is not putting food in my belly right now. I can go home. My mother's going to cook for me. My dad's going to buy me the video game, right? Why is this important to me? Right?
Right.
Why kids are more interested in things like fighting. Kids get really interested in fighting in middle school. Why? Because they may need to fight someone because someone is bullying them. So they want to play the fight video game or watch the movie about karate or jiu-jitsu or whatever. Because some kid might be bullying. That's a bit of information that they need. That is what? A comprehensible input. Because it is understandable and it's compelling. Right? So that's why celebrities, rappers, and dancers, and singers, and actors, they are influencers because they're providing inputs. They're providing inputs that young people are interested in. And this is why TikTok is so popular. This is why TikTok is popular. Right? So as educators, what we need to do is be able to learn how to entice the amygdala. It makes sense?
Yes, makes sense.
Right? If you're able to satisfy and entice that amygdala, then the amygdala will send the information to the frontal cortex or the prefrontal cortex. And then that is when higher order thinking, right? That's when the brain is be able to get interested in playing with it, reading about it, participating in it, engaging it. Okay.
Right.
So let's talk about what happens or how we can get, or what happens. Yeah, let's talk about what happens when the amygdala sends that information to the prefrontal cortex. What happens is learners become self-determined. Self-determined. And what is self-determination? Self-determination is the ability for a person to set their own goals. The ability for a person to set their goals by themselves. And this is what we really want learners to do. And again, this is the problem with education. Because with education, the teacher or the principal or the parent or the community are setting goals for people. No, people have to set their own goals. And this is why it's important that we differentiate a student from a learner. A student is different than a learner. When you say student, you don't want someone to be independent. You want someone to be dependent on the process. When you say student, you want someone to be dependent on the process. When you say learner, you want someone to be independent of the process. But the problem with learner is, the problem is not with the learner, the problem becomes with the system. Is that teacher willing to allow the learner to be a learner? Or does that teacher want that learner to actually be a student? Sit down, be quiet, listen to me. Wait till the end of my lecture to ask a question. Hold on, I'm talking, don't ask a question. No, I didn't say that. Listen to what I said. You see?
This is a passive.
They want students to be passive learners.
Mhm.
Why? Because of the human. So a good teacher removes themselves out of the teacher and strips themselves out of the title of teacher and becomes a learner too. So in the classroom, you don't have a teacher and students, you have a learner and more learners.
Mm.
But that's a very hard concept to get people to understand. I went to this college and I have my master's degree and I have my license. These students gonna learn. Work like that. And you're a parent and you know you can't parent like that. I'm the father, you do what I say. It doesn't work like that. Why?
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work like that. Why? Because people have their own minds. They have their own RES and they have their amygdalas. That's always going to fight back. Whether they fight passively or actively or aggressively, they're going to fight back in some way. So in the prefrontal cortex, what happens is when you stimulate that amount of intellectual activity, the learner becomes self-determined. Secondly, they become self-regulated. They become self-regulated. And what is self-regulation? Self-regulation is the ability to self-motivate to move towards those goals that were self-determined. Self-regulation is the ability to self-motivate. I almost see it as an energy source, a renewable organic energy source that motivates the person to move towards the goal. Without any catalyst, without the teacher saying, okay, sit down, be quiet, do this, may want to think about it. No, I could do it on my own. Without mommy and daddy saying, pick up your stuff, clean your room. Come on now, it's 7:30. You know you're supposed to brush your teeth before you go to bed. How many times do I have to say this? Right? No, it's that point in which the learner brushes their teeth. Why? Because they understand why having healthy teeth are important. So the parent goes, one parent says, brush your teeth, 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 brush your teeth. And the other parent goes, hey, look, if you don't brush your teeth, you're gonna be like your uncle that has no teeth. You wanna be like your uncle that has no teeth? You wanna be like Uncle Jeff? Uncle Jeffrey that has no teeth?
No.
No, I don't wanna be like, if you don't brush your teeth, oh, I'm gonna brush my teeth. Man, you're brushing your teeth too much. I don't wanna be like Uncle Jeffrey. Right?
Right.
Then from that, they begin to go into the prefrontal cortex, and then you see them watching YouTube videos on maintaining oral hygiene. They start reading books about maintaining good oral hygiene. They start to really dive into it beyond what you want them to do. Why? Because now there's something invested, because they self-determined, set their own goals. Because now the goals is not trying to not to have better teeth than Uncle Jeffrey. Now the goal is to have whiter teeth or straighter teeth or whatever. And then they begin to learn about how oral hygiene is connected to the entire physical health, their entire health, right? So now they're starting to go on. That's transfer taking place. So Camara DeVello said, how do we get there? By understanding that the people that the classes that you teach, they're actually individuals. You teach classes, you teach individuals. So if you had a class of 25 students, you're not teaching a class of 25 students, you're teaching a class of 25 individuals. So it's 25 classes that are going on. This is why we should have smaller class sizes. This is the argument for smaller class sizes.
This considered as a private lessons, my teacher, and this because a lot of it needs a lot of teachers.
That's the problem. That's the problem.
There is of
sorry,
English not English teachers, but teachers generally speaking.
That's only a problem if you look at it from an education perspective. But if you look at it from a learning perspective, it's not a problem. One person teaches 100 people. Because I'm not a teacher now. I'm a learner. And in the course of me learning, I become an example for people watching and learn. And then they can take They can take from me as they wish to build their own process.
Mm-hmm.
You see? So no, we don't need a lot of teachers in that regard. Oh, excuse me. Let me correct that. Yes, if you're looking at it from an education standpoint, you need a lot of teachers. However, if you're looking at it from a learning perspective, you just need a handful of good learners.
But also the problem is from schools itself, because not the directory of educations think of self-learning, looking for learners, but they're looking for educators.
Exactly.
Therefore, it's the problem that you are suffering from it.
Absolutely. Why? Unless it's the human condition. Because we don't want to be out of a job.
Yes.
We want to work. So you need me. You need me. Right? I don't want to teach you how to be independent. I need you to be dependent on me.
Yes.
But a good teacher, a good teacher teaches a student to not need them, to be independent. Because you cannot have a dependent student who experiences frequent, watch my language here, frequent learning transfer. Frequent. We need to be consistent, not sometimes, not just for the test or just for the assessment. We needed to be experiencing it consistently on a daily basis. You see, under the education model, I just need you to experience it during the test. So I can get the grades back and I can say, look, my students did well on the test because I am an excellent teacher. You see?
Wait, what?
The third thing that happens in the prefrontal cortex, something called self-efficacy. Self-efficacy, E-F-F-I-C-A-C-Y. E-F-F-I-C-A-C-Y. Self-efficacy is the phenomenon, and all of these are phenomena. It's the phenomenon where the learner is what I call encouraged. He's gains confidence. So it doesn't matter how much he fails. He has the ability to get back up and try again. Through regulation, move towards that self-determined goal. And he has the confidence. He can see a challenge. He can see a challenge. And self-efficacy, like, I can do it. I can do it. Bring it on.
Just can't get it.
Bring it on. I'll figure it out. It may take me a day. It may take me 2 days. Hey, it may take me a week or a month, but I'm going to get it. Right? That's self-efficacy. A learner who doesn't have self-efficacy is actually a student. I don't understand this. I need a tutor. Help me. Right? Now, I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying a student, or excuse me, a learner who has self-efficacy doesn't actually help. They do actually help. Don't get me wrong, they actually help. Okay. But what I am saying is that they have the ability not to easily be discouraged. They have the ability not to be discouraged. Okay. And we see that in the classroom all the time, right? Students get very discouraged. That's too hard. I'm frustrated. I'm confused. I don't want to do this. Right? What I gotta learn is junk anyway. Right? But when we create lifelong learners, independent thinkers, okay, they gain self-efficacy. And regardless of the challenge, regardless of how difficult it is, they're willing to take on that challenge, right? They're willing to take on that challenge. Right? So these are things that happen in the prefrontal cortex. They don't happen in the amygdala. They don't happen in the RAS. And for a learner to get to the point where they're working out their developing their self-determination, developing their self-regulation, developing their self-efficacy, they must be in a stage where those phenomenons are occurring in the prefrontal cortex. So we got to get them. Our job as educators is to get them from the reticular activating system to the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex. Once they're in the prefrontal cortex, we can fall back and let magic happen. Let God do his thing. Right? Our job is we're tour guides. We're taking them on that journey from the RAS to the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex. And we say, all right, bye. Go and do your thing now. Right? So that's the learning journey that takes place that we must do. And if we fail to do these things, then we will not experience, we will have less students experiencing learning transfer, and they will experience it less often. But we have to create learners who are continuously and consistently experiencing learning transfer, because we are taking them throughout that journey from RAS to the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex. And that's a journey. And the best thing that we can do is give them the why this is important. The best thing we can do is scaffold the information. I+1, scaffolding. I+1. The best thing we can do is be patient. The best thing we can do is be contextual. The best thing we can do is upskill ourselves. Learn more about the brain. The best thing we can do is learn a profile. Know who your students are in the classroom. What are their challenges? What are their likes and dislikes? What do they perceive as a disadvantage and an advantage? Develop the understanding of a learner's context. That's what the learner profile is. The learner profile is developing the learner's the variables that consist of a learner's context. Because we said, what is context? Excuse me. What is context? Context is the situation the learner understands. So the best thing that we can do as learners ourselves, as teacher learners, whatever you want to call us, practitioners. That might be a better term. Practitioners. The best thing we can do as practitioners is to learn about who we are attempting to guide. Learn who they are. Learn what their contexts are. So we can help them guide through their maze. And everyone's journey from the RAS to the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex is going to be different. That's where particularity comes in. So that means the method that you use, practicality, is going to adjust It's just like if you're a mechanic, you don't just say, give me the screwdriver. You need the whole tool bag. You might need the screwdriver one moment. You might need a hammer the next moment. You might need a saw another moment. You might need a ratchet another moment, right? You may need a 3/4 inch socket. You might next thing you may need a 1/4 inch socket. You might need it next moment. You might need an inch socket. And that's our job as practitioners. So when we talk about learning acquisition or language acquisition rather, we have to remember that our job is not to teach them English. Our job is to take them to do their journey from the RES to the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, is to guide them through that process so they can teach themselves with our support along the way. How's that for a session? Was that some good,
It's
was that data or was
marvelous.
that information? Did I give you data
This
or
is
did I give you information?
no, so you're giving information. Information.
All right, good, good. Well, I think I'm gonna stop there because I think I said a lot. When we come back tonight at 7, I want you to kind of think about that, write your notes down, and talk to me about what I talked about today.
Okay, all right.
All right, and it doesn't have to be fancy. Just kind of think about those 2 questions. What did I learn, and how could I use it towards my teaching? So that's your 2 questions that
For
guide
the
you.
journal.
Yeah. So when we come back at 7 o'clock today, we're going to have an exchange about what did I learn today.
For this
And
for today, not for yesterday before.
for both, because
For
you can
both.
mix both. You can mix both in. So what did I learn today or yesterday? Or yeah, because you'll have 2 journals, right? So it'll be 2 different journals. So you can talk about one and you can talk about the other. Okay. What did I learn? And how can I use what I learned to improve my teaching? Okay. And we'll talk about that. We have an exchange about that. Did you get a chance to read chapter 1 of the Smooth Move book?
In fact, now after finishing, I will have a nap for 1 hour and then start.
Just read that first chapter of the Smooth Move book. You can take that data inputs. That's also an opportunity to ask me any questions that you didn't understand in that chapter, and I can explain.
All right.
Okay.
All right. All right.
All right. So we'll see you 7 o'clock tonight, huh?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Do you have any questions for me right now?
No, it's clear. Just
right.
to repeat listening to your lecture and then to get notes and then to write this journal.
All right. Perfect. Well, I'll see you 7 o'clock tonight.
All right.
All right.